Recently, I've been making some improvements to the studio space, which you don't usually get to see much of because you often just get to see one kind of background angle in most of my videos. But in the studio, there's quite a lot of stuff going on. We have a lab corner where I do my amateur hematology, among other things. We have the kind of manufacturing section where the Prusa Excel 3D printer is. We have a couple of storage areas, an inspiration corner, an artifact section, and now an audio-visual workspace being built and set up. Now, this is all just to expand my capabilities, my interests, my learning, what I can produce, etc. But oftentimes I don't talk a lot about things on video because it's just not really that relevant, not always relevant to the Blender audience. But I figure I'll make an exception today and just give you a little bit of information. So for the audio-visual workspace, I have done some music production in the past. Usually it was for game development projects, alternate reality game projects, typically like ambient type music or soundscape, sound engineering, that kind of thing. Not really, popular culture type music. I've never really been super interested in that. I'm more interested in discovering specific sound profiles, but it's not really something I got to implement much in the YouTube channel. However, I've become more interested recently for a few reasons. Number one is I've been noticing this cycle of my creative mind where, like, one of the reasons I got into doing 3D art was because in the past, I got so annoyed at having to use other people's assets for things. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, if the artist just changed this or that, then this would look so much better. And that ultimately got me into doing 3D art more. And I felt the same kind of thing happening with music. Like I was kind of sick of paying subscription fees for royalty-free music for whatever projects in the past, so I just stopped using music in my videos. But there's always been this kind of underlying thing where listening to anyone's track, I think, oh, if they just changed this one tiny thing, then it would sound so much better. So I kind of feel that impetus arriving again. It's like, okay, this is an opportunity to learn something. So I've been setting up a space in the studio that I call the audio visual workspace. Now this is kind of, it's like a little home cinema mixed with what will be audio production. And in my mind, if I was to do more animated short type content in the future, this is where I would kind of compose it all together. And it's been interesting since starting to prototype this space. I played Epoch, one of my old shorts, on the big screen with the music from Ui. I don't know how to pronounce the name, but, registered for Epidemic Sound. And I thought, it's really cool actually watching it up on the big screen. And it crosses my mind while kind of sitting there enjoying it. Like, why did I ever stop with this? I think part of the reason is largely because of the time investment, but that's not really much of an excuse because when doing things like the lighting demos, all it takes is just doing a 10-second clip every time. Like every time I have an experimental file, just do a 10-second animation, then drop that into a folder space somewhere. And then eventually there'll be enough content in there to make something interesting, even if it's completely random and not cohesive. I've had the opportunity the whole time to do like animated music video type shorts that are just satisfying to watch, but I never really put it all together. So it's interesting sitting there, looking at the screen, visualizing what the space could be and thinking, yeah, you know what, maybe I should take a step back into that. It would all gel well with what I'm doing nowadays anyway, with the Patreon and all that. It would give me more opportunity for files to share. Theoretically, if I made music for my projects, even if it's ambience, I can make that available to people as well. It's all productive, it's all tangentially related. So I think it'll be nice. Alongside the large screen that's already in the studio, I'm going to be replacing this kind of old monitor with an ultra wide. And though I've got this old MIDI keyboard, the MPK, I'll be replacing it with a Novation 61 key. Setting up this prototype space also got me wanting a shared file system again. Now, I've been quite cautious with the way I would approach that in the past for security reasons, but I've been experimenting with, regular Windows shared files over the local network, and it just works supremely well, especially given how many Ethernet ports there are around this studio. If I share a folder between the computers, I can literally record into the folder and it's just instantly available, everywhere on every computer. And I have not noticed any lag time whatsoever, when using it. It's kind of insane. It's a little bit weird. So what I want to do is now get an independent computer. I might buy a cheap new one, hopefully with PCIe, USB expansion ports and all that. And I like using hot swap bays. From there, I will use SSDs because I don't really like hard disk drives, although maybe I can use it for that machine. And I will turn that computer into what is effectively like a serverless server in some way. It'll be built around the Windows file sharing system, but then I could also run automations and backups on that device itself. Interestingly as well, I came up with something fantastic recently. Again, I don't actually know if anyone else has done this before. Maybe they have. Maybe I'm sure, I'm not the only one to come up with this, but I turned PureRef into a wiki. So PureRef is a software that we typically use to look at our references and annotate them and all that. I discovered that if you do self-local links to other PureRef files in the file, it will open those files in the same instance, which means that without needing to do like a full path for anything, you can jump between PureRef files based on links in the canvas, which means if you put like 100 PureRef files in one folder or appropriate subfolders, representing all of your different interests and projects, you can just access all of them from one opened instance of PureRef. So theoretically, if you threw that folder onto a shared folder space, every single computer in the studio would be able to access this custom reference wiki system. And I love it because I can throw in anything, any image, any drawing. It can contain, tons of text. I can add stickers of all different kinds. I love the visual system of it, because I've always been using Notion, and I will still use Notion, but I've always thought, I just wish there was like a really adaptive like mind map system. And I know that Obsidian has a mind map system, as other people have liked to tell me, but it's kind of shit, just to be really blunt about it. It's not very intuitive or effective or creative to use, especially not compared to PureRef. And yes, I know there are all sorts of plugins, but it's just ungainly. But that doesn't mean I don't like Obsidian. In fact, with this idea of this serverless server system, this is another idea I did have relating to Obsidian, which is that if you had a vault of data available to every studio computer, but you had different modified versions of Obsidian on each computer, in theory, they may be able to read the same data, but present it in different ways relating to the context of the workstation based on the plugins you use and all that kind of jazz. So that's something I find quite interesting. The idea of having this unified data system that is perceived differently depending on the context it's being accessed from. So that's something I may play with more. But of course, everything costs money, so it's a bit expensive. So I'm going to need to drip feed this or develop it bit by bit over time as I make a little bit more money. I do have backup old computers and stuff, but not all of them are viable to use. But then again, like I said, for a shared file service, what I could do is just use a PC building company that I've partnered with before and get them to make something very cheap. It won't require a GPU, obviously. It's just managing files. So anyway, I think I'll leave that there. Just thought you might like this little interesting look at a couple of things changing in the studio. When I have more to share or something's produced, then I will obviously let you know. But otherwise, consider signing up to the Patreon or checking out my products. If you sign up as a Silver Tier member on the Patreon, you'll get access to exclusive content and pre-releases for free resources on curtisholt.online/members. It will also increase the wage that I have every month to work on free things for the wider community. But if you are a professional and you want some help with your workflow, then I recommend you check out my paid tools at curtisholt.online/store, specifically Afterglow and Modular Workspaces. They're my two main flagship products. Although if you made it to the end, put a music related emoji in the comments so I can see if you made it this far. See ya.